Welcome to Forest Chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we're talking with Sasha Wasley about being an author. Sasha can't seem to constrain herself to one genre. She writes middle grade fiction and urban fantasy as Ash Harrier. Her debut novel was published in 2015. Today, she lives in the Perth Hills region with her partner and two adult children, surrounded by dogs, cats, and chickens. Welcome to Forest Chat, Sasha.
Thank you, Paul. I'm so happy to be here.
Great to have you here. Sasha, we've been talking before we got online about all the different types of authoring that you've done. What type of author are you?
Oh, I think the best word to describe me would be a hybrid author, which encompasses traditional publishing as well as small press publishing and self publishing. So I have done all three, been there, done that, and have the t shirt. As a result, I consider that I have got a fairly good breadth of experience in the industry. And I often, therefore, work with aspiring authors to help them choose their path.
How do you go about that work with aspiring authors?
Well, I run a program called Path to Published, and I also run a Substack called The Book Path. And it's all about giving authors some guidance because the one thing about this industry is that nobody tells you what it's really like until you're there and you're learning it. And I've been in the industry for 10 years now. So I figure that I've got some knowledge and I want to share that with other authors because as a newbie author, I really didn't have a clue. And that made it really quite difficult for me. For example, I didn't know how to interact with my publisher. I didn't know how to interact with my agent. I didn't know how the process of producing a book looked or what to expect from it. But everyone kind of thinks that you do know that. So when it comes down to it, you're left in the dark and you don't know what's going on, and you hear from your publisher and agent very rarely. So when you transition from a regular job where you're continually talking to your boss or your supervisor throughout the day and your colleagues, and you know what everyone else is doing roughly, and you know what you should be doing, there's very little in the way of that when you become an author, particularly when you shift into the full-time author role. So I figured what I can do for these aspiring authors is give them a kind of a window into the process, help them understand what is going to be expected of them, what kinds of interactions they can expect, the shady goings on that occasionally occur, because it is important to know about that. You shouldn't go into the industry expecting to see that, but it is important to know how it all works. And then just terminology, jargon, things like rights, translation rights, audio rights reversion, which is something that I undertook recently, which I'll chat about a bit later. And basically understanding contracts, what sort of payments to expect, when you'll get them. Here's an example. When I started out, I was told that my advance on royalties was a certain amount, and I expected to get that all at once. And what I didn't realize was that is going to be spread over the three books in your contract. And not just that, it is going to be spread over three stages of each book in your contract. So you actually end up getting around about 9 payments, and you certainly don't get it all at once. So don't give up your day job as soon as you get that book contract, because it's going to be more like getting little Christmas presents every few months. So yes, those sorts of things come as a surprise as a baby author. So I hold their hands during those toddler years as they're learning to walk, and also help them with the preparation of their book process and the pitching and coping with rejection, because rejection is not just something you need to deal with in the publishing industry. It is a part of the job, an integral part of the job. You will continue to get rejections even after you have become a successful full-time author. So that's something that's really important to understand.
It can be very finicky by the sounds of things, what they want to publish at a particular time.
Yeah, you've absolutely nailed it on the head there. So, publishing is very much about crashing into the right zeitgeist at the right moment. And you don't really always get that through writing a wonderful quality book. Sometimes you get that through pure dumb luck, as Professor McGonagall would say in Harry Potter. I think you need to hit the market at the right moment with the right product. And that can be very much down to smarts. So you need to be watching what's happening in the market. But how do you predict what's going to be popular in 18 months? That's really inside information. And a lot of the time, the publishers don't even have it. I recently did a post on my Substack where I asked booksellers, an agent, and a couple of publishers what's hot, what's not, what's dead, and what's coming. And I got quite a wide variety of answers, which I had sort of expected because no one really knows. When a publisher picks up a book, they can have a pretty good idea of the popularity of the genre, of whether the market is still really hot for that kind of book, and the quality of the book. They can see if it's going to probably make a splash, but there are never any guarantees. However, that information allows them to make a certain size of investment in you and your book as an author. And the fact is, there is a mid list, and most authors end up either on the mid list or right at the bottom, where they don't sell many books. The ones who make it big are very, very far and few between. So they will make decisions about you based on that information. They will also make a decision whether or not you're going to be one of their mid-list authors or one of their breakout successes. They can't always control how that pans out. Sometimes a mid-lister hits the market at exactly the right moment with the right product and goes absolutely bonkers, which is amazing. And everyone's excited because they didn't spend that much on you. But your next book, they'll have to spend a lot more on you. And sometimes what they tout as a breakout success and they pour all their energy and all their resources into it just doesn't come off. So there's very little certainty in this industry. I hope I'm not putting people off being an author by talking about this, but these are the facts. And this is what I've learned over 10 years of being an author. And I've kind of had to really get my head screwed on because I came into it quite starry-eyed. I thought that my first book, which was picked up by a tiny little publisher in Canada who do digital only and print on demand. So basically they rely on Amazon. It's pretty much like self-publishing, except I didn't have to pay for a cover design. They did very little editing on my book, just enough to make sure there were no typos. And out it went into the world. And I expected it was going to be the next Harry Potter or the next Hunger Games. And, so you can imagine how excited I was when after the first couple of weeks I'd sold maybe a dozen copies of the book. I had to come back down to earth with a bump. And I guess that was my first big lesson in the publishing industry, is that no matter how much you want it, doesn't mean it's going to happen. You can't just visualize or manifest success into being. You have to actually go through your paces. There are very, very few, even less than the number I was talking about of successful authors before, who make it big first time round. So the successful debut author is like a unicorn. There's very few of them, and you'll be surprised if you ever meet one of them. And a lot of the time you don't know what's going on in the background there either. So I guess the moral of that story is come into the industry hopeful and believing in yourself, but not expecting success with that first book. Because normally it is a little bit like an internship. You need to do your paces. You need to get your training under your belt. You need to experience having books out in the world before you hit your breakout success. I consider that I have not ever had a breakout success. I've had some books more successful than others. But I am firmly on the mid list, and that's okay because I'm a surviving full time author. I've managed to diversify my income enough that I am able to do this full time. But certainly, it wouldn't have paid off if I had thought that that first book was my big chance and that was the only chance. So I'm glad that I stuck at it.
And you've had the experience of being published by a publisher and then also an indie publisher. Was that your first book?
So I've had a few different publishers and paths. Should I run through them?
Yeah.
Okay. So my first book, as I said, very small digital only press, wonderful little publishing house. And I guess that was like my plan B. I had always just been pitching to big established publishers and I had got nowhere. And I'm talking 25 years of pitching. I was 40 when I got my first publishing deal, and that was the small press. And it was because I lowered my expectations, not to be insulting to that press, because they're great. They've been around for a long time now, and they give authors their start and they support their authors, and a lot of their authors stick with them. I did for 3 books. And then I managed to get an Australian traditional publishing deal with Penguin Random House. And I discovered that that, for me, was much more what I was after as an author. I wanted to see my books on shelves in shops, and I wanted people to be buying my print books and have them reading them on trains and sending me emails to say that they'd liked them. And I wanted to be going to book launches and all. I wanted all the trappings associated with being an author. But more than any of all of that, I just wanted to see my books on shelves. So that was the experience I got from being with Penguin Random House. That was a 3-book deal. In the meantime, between the two, I'd had a little blip where I tried some self-publishing. I put out 5 books in rapid succession, probably within 18 months. Really got nowhere with that. I did not know what I was doing. I could see other people doing it and having major success, and I couldn't understand why that wasn't happening for me. I understand now because I look back and I go, I actually had not hit the right genre, and no one could really understand what genre my books were. And for that kind of publishing, you need to be 100% sure of the kinds of books you're putting out and who your readers are. So all of that was a big confused mess for me. So yeah, hardly sold any of those. Then I transitioned from the big publisher, Penguin Random House. I went over to Pantera Press, which is a medium-sized Australian publisher who have had some big successes and some moderate successes. And, they've kind of been there, done that. I really loved the angle that they had. They were a progressive, dynamic, change-focused publisher, which is kind of the raison d'etre for my writing. I like to affect change through my writing, which I'll talk about a bit later. So I really gelled beautifully with the publisher, the role, because, of course, when we talk about a publisher, most of us mean a publishing house, but actually a publisher is a role within the publishing house. And my publisher there, Lex Hurst, is the publisher I still work with today for my traditionally published books. I went over to her in 2019, and my first book with them came out in 2021. We skipped over the COVID year, thank goodness. And I've had a book out almost every year with them since. They also publish my middle grade books, so my Alice England books as Ash Harrier. And since then, I have also decided that I would self-publish a couple of other books, kind of as something to keep me busy in the background, because I find traditional publishing is a little bit slow for me. One book a year or every couple of years, that doesn't suit me. I need to be writing more than that. So this last year, I requested my rights back from my first little digital publisher. I had 3 books with them, as I said, and the rights had expired. So I contacted them and said I would like my rights back because I want to rewrite those books and I want to put them out myself and just give them another little chance in the market. So that's where I'm at now. I've got 2 self-published books out now in the last 6 months, and I've got another one coming out in May and another one coming out in September.
We've got a very good schedule there. You know where you're going.
I do, I do know where I'm going, yes. And I never give myself time to stop and breathe.
It's sort of that comment almost seems a little bit strange because you think that writing is something that you want to actually stop and breathe and write.
Yeah, look, I guess I've got two speeds, and the slower one I use for my traditionally published books. So the book that is coming out next, which is not until March 2026, has been a much slower process. It involved a lot of research. It's a historical book, and it's a big book. It's 130,000 words. And it took a long time to write and a long time to edit. And now it's going to take a long time to prep for production because we want to do this right. We want to get it out to advanced readers and the media with a really long period of time for them to read it, review it, and hopefully promote it. Whereas with self published, you tend to work a lot faster because it is about capturing a moment, getting a book out in a moment that people want to read that kind of book, and then capturing them into some kind of email list so that they are going to buy your other books. So you want to get books out pretty quickly. So you've got a backlist behind you that these people are going to be buying. So it's quite a different approach. One of them is very much the artist, the creative artist, much more traditional kind of mindset. And the other one is the business. And it is a hustler, basically. So I've got my hustle role and then I've got my artiste role.
I can see that you really want to be balancing that, and I would imagine that they both can take up a lot of your time.
Yeah, you're right there. I find that the business side can take up, it's like a black hole of time and energy. It can take everything out of you. So I have to be careful. I found myself quite burnt out last year. It was after running something called a Kickstarter. So it's basically for your listeners who might not have heard of it. It is a crowdfunding platform where essentially you do like an early release. So if you're an author, you can do a bit of an early release or a special edition release. And people back the project, and in doing so, they buy the product. But they only lose their money or spend their money if the project hits a certain goal. So my book did. This was the one that I took the rights back for. And I created an early special edition with hardcover and a special dust jacket and all of that. And it got funded to the point where I could pay for my editor, for my cover design, for the production of the book, setting everything up. And then everyone got their books around Halloween last year, which was suitable because it's kind of a spooky story. And then I released it to the public just this month on the 2nd of February. That was amazing. But talk about energy and time required to run that Kickstarter. I had never done anything like that before. And I was absolutely thrilled when it hit its target within the first, I think it was 12 hours. So that was, blew my mind. But then you have to continue. And the rule is with a Kickstarter, you have to post about it on your socials much more than you feel comfortable with. And I'm a bit of an introvert. I also hate asking people to do things for me. That's one of my blockages, my soul blockages. So with a Kickstarter, you have to ask people to do things for you continually. And you also have to be really extroverted about it. So you have to get on video and you have to talk to people publicly. So I was getting on there every day and saying, hey, come and back my Kickstarter. And hey, will you help me spread the word and share my posts? And it was very uncomfortable for me. I was right out of the comfort zone. And at the end of it, I had this period where I felt very flat and very tired. I needed a lot of sleep. I felt a bit depressed as well and very uncreative. I couldn't write, like my brain, no work, no more. So luckily, after about a month's rest, I came out of that and things got back to normal. But I was panicking for a while. I thought, oh my gosh, have I expended myself? Am I no more going to be an author?
It's amazing when you get into something so deeply and takes over your life, in effect, that you have to pull back almost completely and wait before other things come back. It's sort of like a healing process you have to go through.
That's so true. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was almost like a period of intense training and, performance, high performance. And then I needed that rest period afterwards. If only I'd come out of it physically, like I'd been through a period of intense training and high performance. But it was just the mental stuff that was going on for me.
Yeah, on the physical side, we regularly see people who run marathons and they do so much getting up to the marathon, like they've really had to work hard to get there, and they get through it, and then you don't see them for a month or longer sometimes because they're just over the whole process of running. They don't even want to pull the shoes on. And
Yeah.
that sounds a very similar thing to what you've had. That was a physical example, and yours is a mental example. So it can happen in both spheres and probably in other ways too. But
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that people often discover about being a creative, so being an artist or a performer or a poet or an author, is that if you're stressed, it's very hard to tap the creative well. So it's happened before to me when one of my children was going through a severe mental health crisis and quite prolonged, where I actually did wonder if I had told all the stories that were in me because I couldn't find anything that I wanted to write about. I couldn't bring myself to write. But after things improved a bit with my child, then it came back. The creative well opened up again. So that was a relief. You need to, when you find yourself in that spot, you need to trust that it's going to come to an end and you will find that creativity again. But during that time, just allow yourself to have the black moment, I suppose, and don't try and push through because I think anything you write is probably not going to be, it's not going to come out well. It'll be strained and forced, and it won't be your best creative work. So you might as well just let yourself have that recovery time.
yes, you're better off doing the recovery, definitely.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Cut yourself some slack, I need to take my own advice to be quite honest, but this is what I tell my authors that I work with. If you're having a really bad time, just put things on pause with your writing. You'll come back to it. One thing that writers have is the insatiable urge to write, and that's never going to go away. You might have periods where it's less strong, but it's never going to go away.
That's comforting to know. So we've actually talked a few things about what it takes you to be an author. Is there anything you might want to add to what it takes you to be an author?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that makes an author is reading. So when I was a child, we didn't have a lot of money, but I had a very resourceful older sister. And one thing she was really good at was begging, borrowing, and stealing books. And I say that quite literally because a lot of our books had still had the little library slip in them because she had just never returned them. I consider it a virtuous theft, however, because what she was doing was providing for her younger siblings. She created her own little library and I would go and borrow books from it. And so, therefore, I became a voracious reader. I also borrowed books myself from libraries. And I'm sure I occasionally accidentally stole them as well because, sometimes years later you find one in the bottom, right at the bottom of your bag or your closet or whatever, and you go, oops, that one never went back. I also had family members who gave me books for my birthday because they knew that I was a reader. So I had a good collection of books and I read and I reread. And for me, it was escapism. I'm pretty sure now that I look back that I'm undiagnosed, maybe autism spectrum disorder. And therefore, for me, a lot of the social world at school was a mystery. Therefore, I was quite introspective and quite uneasy in that school environment. So when all else failed, go and sit in the library and read a book. It was my escape. And then when I discovered I could write, and I still remember this, I still remember learning to print, which was quite, everyone learns to print letters. But then around the age of 8, they taught us running writing. And for me, that was a revelation. I remember going and sitting in my school library in a beanbag, just with a bit of paper, and just practicing my running writing. And I'm sure it was all wrong because I wasn't doing it under guidance or anything. But what it did for me was realize that I could write faster and I could write things. So I started writing stories, and I was that annoying kid at school who would hand in a 10-page story when the teacher only wanted one page. So I'm sure they probably didn't read it. They just, gave you the smiley face on the stamp at the end. But yeah, once I realized that it wasn't enough to be handing in the stories at school, I started writing them for my friends or for my sisters or for myself. And it started as letters to my friends, and I would make up little stories within those. And then it became radio plays where we would record things on our cassette player. And then it became stories, and the stories became books. So by the age of 14, I'd written my first book length story. And it never got finished. The thing was massive. So early reading turned into writing. And for me, then the writing became the escapism. It was my way of switching off my brain because my brain had a lot of messy stuff going on in it, as all teenagers do. But I think with the undiagnosed neurodivergence as well, there was probably a lot of angst going on in there, which I now see in my kids because they've got it too. They've been diagnosed, which they use various methods to switch off. They both write as well, and they both read. So I believe that a lot of authors, a lot of writers have neurodiversity in their background, and they're using it as a way to calm the thoughts, get some of the ideas out, and escape from some of the difficulties of the neurotypical universe. So I guess that's probably my biggest recommendation for anyone who wants to be a writer is make sure you're also a reader. I have met people who say I'm a writer, but I don't read. And I always look at them with a very skeptical eyebrow because I just don't see how you can really understand words and writing without having done the hard yards of being the reader as well. So I would recommend to them that they go away and do some reading, or at least be listening to audiobooks and, reading something. I just don't see how you can master the craft of writing if you haven't also been a reader.
It's sort of like not having a feedback loop.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's Roald Dahl, or it might have been it's one of the other very well known authors, would spend 3 or 4 hours in the morning writing, and then 3 or 4 hours, like the matching amount of time in the afternoon reading. And that's actually how I do my day. I do the output in the morning and I do the input in the afternoon because I tend to move very hard and fast when it comes to writing. My destroyed keyboards over the years will be testament to that. So in the morning, it's my writing time. It's when my brain is switched on. I've got a lot of energy. So I pour all those words onto the page. Then in the afternoon, it's like my kind of dead brain time. And I've poured all those words out. And what I need to do is refill. So I need that feedback cycle to happen there. That's when I read. And I do spend probably as long reading as I do writing every day.
It's interesting to hear that you have a balance like that, and you're not the only one that has that balance.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of authors and writers think that they just have to pour out as many words as they can. But that's not sustainable because I think the words would dip in quality towards the end of the day. It's hard mental work creating stories in your head and putting them onto a page. That's really quite a process when you think about it. And there is a point during the writing of any book where it does consume you. And at that point, I tend to write all day long. And I can feel it, by the end of a couple of weeks of that, I'm like a little hunched, bent over pretzel. Physically, I'm so exhausted and sore. And it's always, oh, thank heavens, when it actually finishes. But the story takes over at that point, and there's just nothing I could do about it. I just have to get the rest of it out. It's almost like I'm on a downhill ski run, and I just have to stay on the skis and let it happen. But that's usually only the last quarter of the book. So up to that point, I'm a lot more balanced in the actual process.
You can see the finish line by the sound of things, and you've got
Exactly.
momentum.
Yes, the momentum, and it carries you. But yeah, you're going to be sore. It's a very sedentary process, writing.
Yes, it's amazing how all of that comes together, and you end up with the finished product.
Yes. Yeah, and I was trying to explain before that there's an analogy, quite a famous one, that pouring out that first draft is getting sand into your sandpit. And then you've got the editing process, and that's where you make your castles out of the sand. Because before that, what you're doing is you're telling yourself the story. So you're formulating characters and you're formulating instances and scenes and moments in the plot. But then what you have to do is make it coherent and make sure that it's tight, that your characters are developing through the action in the plot, that you haven't got superfluous scenes, or that you have expressed all of the ways that the character has to grow through what happens to them in the story. And that bit is it's a slower process for me anyway. For some people it's quicker. And it's not a process to be skipped over or taken lightly, because if all you've done is pour words into a bucket, then you need to be making something beautiful, weaving them all together so that you've got something that is an artwork at the end. In the same way that an artist, and my partner is an artist, so I can speak with some knowledge here. They block in the background of their canvas, so they do what's blocking it. They're called blocking in, which is basically getting some color into the background on the canvas, and then some shape, and then they go in, and it's a much more detailed process. And the color and the shape on the canvas is the equivalent of the first draft for a writer. And then going in and adding the detail and moving things around and making it an artwork, that's the editing process for the writer.
That's very interesting. I've not heard of that connection between doing artwork and writing a book. And you're living it.
Yes, I've had a lot of time to think about this. I watch him go, and I mean, I'm not an artist at all, so it's kind of mind blowing to watch him produce something. And then sometimes I'll come in part way through and I'll look at it and I'll think to myself, well, I hope he doesn't ask me what I think, because I don't think that's very good at all. Hope he doesn't listen to this. And then, and it's exactly the same as if he were to come in and look at one of my things partway through the editing process, and he'd go, that's not making sense, and why is this character not doing this here, and all of that, you know. But then at the end, his artwork is stunning, and at the end, hopefully my book is coherent and well woven so that it's a strong story.
So you talk about the process. How do you resolve the mind working at one speed and you're typing at a totally different speed?
Oh, sometimes I wish my fingers could move faster. I actually type with two fingers. I never learnt to touch type, but I type so fast with these two fingers, which is probably why my keyboards suffer, because I taught myself to type on a manual typewriter. And therefore, I still type as if I'm typing on a manual typewriter, which is hard and fierce. So, yeah, these two fingers have got a lot of power in them. They can move pretty fast. I suppose it is frustrating sometimes because you do want them to move faster. And some people dictate their stories and then have AI transcribe them. And I thought maybe I could do that. And possibly I need to practice more. But when I did it, I found that I rambled and my story was not tight at all. And I pretty much had to delete the whole scene that I dictated. So for me, it's very much a process of the thinking occurs through the kinesthetic movement of my fingers tapping away at letters or scratching with a pen on paper. I think that they're pretty well matched, mostly. I'm thinking sentences, formulating them in real time as I'm putting them onto a page. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes, especially during that period towards the end when I'm on the downhill run, I can't keep up with what's happening in the head on the page. So, which is why I end up so tired, physically tired. Yeah, but most of the time it matches up pretty nicely.
We've had a good look now at what it takes to be an author. We'll have a break, and after the break, we'll come back and have a look at what it means. We've had a look at what it takes to be an author. Now, let's have a look at what it means. Sasha, what does it mean to you, your family, or the community that you are an author?
Well, to me, it means the achievement of a lifelong dream, because when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't think that it was possible. It was on the same level to me as becoming a movie star. So I thought the likelihood of it was very low. I thought that perhaps one day I might get a book published, but I would have to continue having another job. So to now be a full-time author is it's magical. It's I'm living my dream and I get to get up every day and do exactly what I want to do. I'm not saying it's not hard and that there's some parts of it that I don't enjoy doing, but I get to go out and say, I'm an author when people ask me what I do for a living. I get to write that on census forms and I
You're
get to go
counted.
out.
You're counted.
Yeah, I've made it. And when I go out and run workshops, which is kind of a secondary source of income for me, even then, when I'm teaching, I'm still being an author because I'm teaching other people how to be an author. So for me, it means everything. And I hope it's never taken away from me because I'll be a very, very sad little sack in the corner. What it means to my family is I have been able to show my children that you can achieve your dream, which is an amazing thing to role model for your children. I think it's also helped my partner get back into his art because when I met him around 12 years ago, he had stopped doing art. And I have to admit, I had not stopped, but certainly put fiction as a backseat to, in the backseat, on the back burner. And when we met each other, we said to each other, what are your hobbies? And I said, I love writing and reading. And he said, can I see something that you've written? And at first I thought to myself, no way. And then I came round and I said, okay, because no one had ever asked me before. And so I showed him what I'd written. And I said, by the way, you've got to show me some of your art now. So he did that. And then I said to him, why aren't you still painting? You're amazing. And he said to me, why aren't you published? You're amazing. And I said, well, I'm not published because no one wanted to publish my work. And, I've got 3 novels sitting there that no one wanted to publish. And he said, well, why don't you write something new? And this is going to sound crazy, but I had never thought of that. I had just been flogging away at these 3 novels for so many years and just trying to get them published. And it had never occurred to me to write something completely new. So I did. And that was my first published novel. And he started doing art again. He was creating gifts for me, for my kids. He was doing artworks for his family. And then he got a place in an exhibition, and then he got another place in another exhibition. And so we kind of created this environment for each other where we could both creatively thrive, which is, I think, what our relationship is founded on. And even now, he hasn't quit his day job yet, but he's doing art regularly. He's going into exhibitions a couple of times a year. So I'm really incredibly proud of him. And now my kids, they pursue their dreams as well. So whilst one of them is working full-time in a retail job, she is also creating beautiful things and selling them online. And my other child is also making beautiful things and doing a lot of writing. And they have now started doing some author PA services. So they're kind of coming into the author industry as well. So they're helping self-published authors with things like uploading books and cover design and so on. So I think that they've both really benefited from seeing both me and my partner pursuing our creative loves and making careers out of them. But there is also the other side, which is that I have to go away fairly regularly for book tours and on writing retreats and running writing retreats and doing appearances and workshops. So I'm kind of required elsewhere a lot of the time. And so that, I suppose, must be a bit of a strain on them. Plus, I become very hard to know and difficult to live with around that downward hill time of the book writing, where I literally don't want to do anything else. And they're kind of like, okay, we have to go see my parents this weekend. And I'm like, do you think they'd be offended if I didn't come? Because I just want to sit down and write for the next 36 hours straight. So there's that side of it as well. As for the community, I think that books are integral to the community. And, I've actually got a lot of fears around AI and the development of streaming services and so on, because they have taken over that form of entertainment that people were accessing through books before. So it's not a very comfortable space at the moment to be an author. But I do believe there will always be people who want to read books. And the purpose they serve for those people are manifold. There's escapism, there's entertainment, there's learning about life and relationships, there's learning about culture and other parts of the world and difference. And the big thing for me when I write is I've got a real passion for social justice and for equality. And all of that bleeds through into my writing. So I've learned a lot from my kids in terms of understanding diversity and difference in the community, and that comes in through my writing as well. So what I hope to do, and I'm not a didactic writer, I don't kind of go, this is the way the world should be or anything like that, but I do write about difference, and I write about how people understand difference and come to accept it. So by doing that, what I hope to do is give people an insight into that difference, but also give them hope. So people who are different and might not feel accepted in society, I want to show them visions of spaces and people who will accept them. So a lot of my, especially my young adult and children's books, feature what they call the trope of found family. So it's where they don't necessarily get everything they need from their actual family, but when they find this group of friends who accept them for exactly who they are, then they get all the things they need. And it's also about, I guess, families coming to terms with difference. There's a lot of that going on in my books as well. So that's my why.
It's an amazing why to be able to put out there. And as an author, you get to choose how you go about that.
Yes, absolutely. And as I say, I'm with a very progressive kind of social change oriented publisher. So they're quite comfortable with me writing things that are kind of challenging for readers sometimes.
Sounds like there's lots of positive meanings there for the writing that you do and also for your family and the way that they're able to do what they want to do simply because they've seen you having a go at it for yourself.
Yeah, and I guess I shouldn't take credit for that completely. I mean, we've always kind of supported each other, but to me, it was always important that my kids understood that what we are born into is a system and it's got lots of cogs and wheels, and they shouldn't be fooled into thinking that their whole reason for existing is to work for someone else and produce stuff and kind of tie completely into a consumer capitalist culture. What I want them to understand is that we need to find spaces within ourselves that give us joy and don't necessarily have any kind of financial value attached to them. So, a lot of what they do is creation for creation's sake. And I suppose what I've been able to do is turn that into a career, but I haven't lost the love of it either. So, yeah, it's kind of win win for me. But I do want everyone to know that you don't have to always do things that work into the economy in some way. You should and can create things that just add joy and beauty to the world and to your life.
That's the whole opposite of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And then there's the other side of things, which is the social sciences and art that is needed for community to actually be a community.
That's right, yeah. And when you look at how unis are being funded now, you've got low course bills for those STEM topics. And fair enough for some of the people, some of the industries we really need people in, like teaching and nursing and so on. But the arts and social sciences are penalized, So basically, what we're doing is charging huge amounts of money for degrees where people are going to become critical thinkers. And to me, that's a little bit suspicious. If we're kind of not encouraging critical thinking in terms of culture and society, why not? What are we afraid of? Are we afraid of criticism? Yeah, so I'm a strong believer that the arts and social sciences are vital in society. And I mean, what's happening in the world right now, It, there's never been a more important time to have critical thinking prioritized in a learning environment.
And you mentioned concerns about AI, and to me, that looks like STEM attempting to take over the social sciences. Maybe not the art, although they do pictures and stuff too.
Oh, absolutely, the arts. There's a lot of fear from authors that soon AI will be good enough to write stories that you can't tell haven't been written by humans. And will that mean we no longer have a job? I think I'm not anti AI blanket, but I don't understand why we would use it to create things that give people joy to create or people joy to consume. So why would we take that away from humans? To me, that like just doesn't make any sense.
I saw a meme that was basically, I want AI to do the dishes and the washing, not to do the fun things.
Yeah, find out how to get the plastics out of the oceans. Don't use it for stuff like that, or do operations on people so that, or theorize on how to fix climate change. But don't take away the creative writing from us. We need that as humans, and we need to read it as well. So one of the things I said recently in a speech I gave about AI was that I think what's going to become really valuable in the future is writing done by humans because there is a connection between the reader and the author. So I think that even if we start to use AI to write books and they do get widely consumed, there will always be readers who want to only read stuff by real humans. And I'm one of them. There's no way that I would want to pick up a book written by AI because to me, that's got no soul. It doesn't matter how good the writing is. I've got no connection with a human who has created that. So it's not interesting to me. So I do believe and I hope that at some point human writing will become the most valued kind of writing out there. But yeah, strange times we're living in.
Absolutely. So there's lots and lots of positive meaning in what Sasha does as a writer. We'll have a break now, and after the break, we'll have a look at how you do it. We've had a look at what it means that Sasha is an author. Now, let's have a look at how you become an author. Sasha, how do you become an author?
Oh, okay. So first you write a book, which sounds silly, but if you haven't got anything to pitch, no one is going to sign you. And I'm talking specifically about being a novelist here, because nonfiction authors actually can go human first pitch and then the book. So they can go and pitch their expertise and say, hey, I want to write a book about this. Are you interested in publishing it? And work with a publisher that way. You cannot do that as a fiction author. The only person who can possibly do that is the biggest, most famous, richest author in the world. They could probably go to a publisher and go, hey, I want to write a book about this. Would you publish it? And the publisher, if they know what side their bread is buttered, will say yes. But most of us have to write that book first, and then we have to get it as good as it can be. So do not make the mistake of writing your book and then sending the first draft, because most likely, unless you are like one in a million, it's it's not ready. It needs work. So this is where you have to put your big girl or big boy pants on and show it to someone else. Preferably not your own mum, who, whilst your mum might be an avid reader and quite a critical reader, they also love you more than anything on this earth. So they're probably not going to give you accurate feedback. So find yourself a writing group or a critique partner. There are groups on social media, like on Facebook, where you can find critique partners. I think they're just called, critique partner group or something like that. And you can also find them. Usually your local library will know if there's a local writers group. Otherwise, just kind of get in touch with someone, sort of reach out online and see if you can find a writing community online and just share the work. So you read theirs, they read yours, and they give a bit of feedback. It might not be the perfect feedback. It won't be as good as you could get from, say, a publisher or even a professional editor, but it'll be feedback. It'll give you a starting point. And the kind of feedback you want is not, is this good or bad? because that is a subjective question and there is no such thing as good or bad. There is, however, the opportunity for you to get reasonably objective feedback about stuff like character development or setting the scene. Have you established where the characters are standing in the room? What's on the walls? Have you told the reader what era this is? Have you set enough of a scene so that you know what the characters roughly look like and what they're wearing and what kinds of objects they have around them? You can also get objective feedback or relatively objective feedback on things like how your character is coming across on the page. So if they are a relatable person, if they start somewhere in the story and then end up somewhere else, kind of psychologically speaking, which is a really important part of any book. So those are the things you can get feedback on. The other one is genre, and it's really, really important to know your genre before you try and pitch your work anywhere, because if you don't know where this is going to sit on the bookshelves in a bookstore, then your publisher won't know either. And if they don't know that, then they can't create a product out of it. And ultimately, your book is a product. For you, it's a work of art. For them, it's a product. So what they're going to need to know is what the book is about, who is likely to read it. And I'm not saying, because a lot of us kind of go, oh, look, anyone would love this book, you know, from the age of 15 to 90. No. You need to know who is most likely to love this book. So it's probably going to be a really quite specific age range and quite a specific gender even. And it might be, you know, for instance, the people who turn up to my adult book launches are generally women between the ages of 30 and 60. So that's my readership right there. So I think about them when I'm writing my books. Yeah, genre. So you also need to be understanding, you know, if you've got horror elements in there, but you've written a romance, is that going to work? Is that going to work for your reader? Is that going to work for the publisher? How are they going to package that? Look, it might work, but you need to understand how. And so if you've got genre crossover there, make sure it's deliberate and make sure you understand that that's going on and you talk about it with the publisher. Then you can also go into a bookshop, pick up an Australian title, and look at the publisher. Once you've got the name of the publishing house, you can then go back to the acknowledgements section at the end and find out who the actual publisher in the publishing house was. And if that book is in your genre and you feel like it's a comparable title to yours, then that is the person you can pitch it to. But finding pitching opportunities in Australia can be quite difficult. A lot of publishing houses are only open a couple of times a year for pitching, so you need to diarise those dates. Other publishing houses will only accept pitches through agents, so then you need to think about whether you want an agent or not, and then which sort of agent you want. So there's a lot of things going on. So I guess the main thing is to write a book, and the second thing is to acquaint yourself with the industry and how to pitch and how to understand your book as a product.
It all sounds so simple on the cover. And that's why there's so many pages in the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, there's a big learning curve, and I guess immersing yourself in a community of other writers who are aiming for publication is one of the best things you can do for yourself as a writer, because you will learn from each other, and then you don't have to go out and start inventing the wheel.
That sounds like a totally appropriate way to approach if you want to get your book published.
Yeah, I think it's the only way.
Thank you very much, Sasha. We've talked a fair bit about just how this whole process comes together, but what's next for you?
Oh, okay. So I've got a book coming out next week. It's sitting right in front of me at the moment. It's called A Lesson in Curses, and this is one of my self-published titles. This is what I'm calling my experiment book. So I drafted this book very quickly. Then I put it away for a month and I edited it. But I also used a very strong outlining system so that I wasn't spending a lot of time drafting and redrafting. So I used a really strong outline that I knew that I could just produce the book along a very organized and strategic pathway. Then I gave it to an editor. She looked at it. She gave me feedback. I did my own feedback after putting it away for a month, which is a really important thing as well. And I'm now putting that book out. I didn't spend a lot of time or money on things like the cover. My experiment is that I'm going to low cost produce a book, put it out there and promote the hell out of it, and just see what happens. Because I think one of the things that slows me down a little bit in life is that I'm a perfectionist. And often I will fret and primp and stress over little things that I probably don't need to, where I should just be getting the damn thing out there and seeing if it sells. So that's my next thing. And then the other big thing that I've kind of got in the works at the moment is my 2026 title, which is called The Society of Literary Marauders. It's set in 1928. It's about an Australian girl. She's a working class girl who goes over to Oxford University. She gets a surprise opportunity to go there. And it's a book all about culture clash and gender and class in the peak of the British Empire. So it ends up being about four young women who are all in the same residential hall at the Women's College in Oxford. Two of them are Australian, one is Indian, part of the British Empire in India, and the other one is a working class woman from a disadvantaged background in Yorkshire. But they form the Society of Literary Marauders and start to read banned books together. So it's a secret society where they start to learn about the world, about sex, about feminism, about class and culture and the empire through their experiences, but also through the books they're reading. And I'm very excited about it. My publisher is very excited about it. We've got a nice long lead time because we're going to be pitching it internationally, trying to get a book deal across the world and have them all come out at the same time. So yeah, I've just finished editing that. It's going into the copy editing stage, which is just kind of tweaks. And yeah, the rights director at Pantera is currently pitching that worldwide.
Wow, that's a big deal.
Yes, very excited about that one.
I'll bet. I'll bet. Thank you very much, Sasha, for being on Forest.chat. And all Forest.chat listeners wish you all the best with your next adventures.
Thank you. If anyone is interested in becoming a writer, I urge you to pursue it. It is an amazing dream to achieve and an amazing job to pursue. So whether it's your kind of personal family history or your memoir or you've got a story in you, just go ahead and start writing and see what happens because yeah, it's rewarding and it's fun. Thank you very much for having me.
A pleasure to have you on. You've been listening to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we talked with Sasha Wasley about being an author. Remember, there are 4 ways to get involved with Forest.chat. Share the domain Forest.chat with your friends and family and people you meet. When you sign up for the emails, you get advance notice of the episodes. Listen to the episodes at forest.chat/episodes. If you do something interesting that others may also find interesting, book an interview at forest.chat/interview. If you want to support a local business, book an advert at forest.chat/advert. I'm looking forward to seeing you again with our next guest. Until then, enjoy making it happen.